We are. Thank you very much for being here with us, all of you. And thank you, Pablo and Oscar, for being. Muchas gracias, queridos. Lindísimo verlos aquí a la distancia.
Hola, Jean-Jacques. Hola, Oscar. And hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here.
Wow. I'm a little bit. I had all sorts of questions prepared for this last screening, and I'm a little bit out of words, out of just the energies left, the residue of this film of yours, Pablo. Thank you very much for that. One of those films that lingers. Maybe the cop out is to ask the most obvious question. How did this? Let me start with you, Oscar. How did this film start for you? Maybe introduce, if you want, a little bit your practice and how the origin of this film came to be, and and it's very early manifestations up until its conclusion. Where did it come from, as far as your own even relationship to the Galapagos Islands, and all that? I think you need to unmute yourself, no? Or yeah, it's maybe we start with Pablo then instead of Oscar until we get this resolved, if that's okay.
No worries.
I hear you now. I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's change the settings.
Fun fact: Oscar is my childhood neighbor.
Oh no, yeah. I'm so happy to be here. So, yeah, to share the film. Thanks, Jack. Well, yes, the film started. Yeah, so the first time I went to the Galapagos Islands, I'm from Guayaquil, in the coast of Ecuador. The first time I went to the Galapagos was a few years ago, and I found myself with this book, Herman Melville's book about the Encantadas, about the islands, and how he wrote about the islands is more of a sketch of some other book he wanted to make, but he kept the sketch as the final form of the film of the book. So I loved how he approached the sketch as the final form or the process of doing something as a sketch. So when I traveled to the island, I took with me the sketch approach to the subject or to the territory rather than the content of the story. And yeah, I started traveling the island for different reasons. I had a job there, then I just moved around the islands and started shooting. I don't know what. I know this. The island has this way of approaching the human beings because they've been so long before us, and especially these dark places as the tunnels. The volcanic tunnels has this sound. And then I started reading more deeply the stories of Melville, and then I found these ideas of the tortoise and how the two sides of human beings, of nature, and the contradictions of wanting to eat something, but at the same time it's something so uh, sacred, and it's also a sacrilege, sacrilegio, not to eat something that's a mystery. But yeah, it's a way of approaching something without knowing what's the outcome of it. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's the
no,
sketch way of doing things.
I think I follow you. I think that anything that touches the Galapagos Islands from a human perspective is sacrilegious. Um, it's meant for pirates, and I think Only yeah, and even its relationship to Ecuador in politics and the way that us Ecuadorians kind of like encounter those islands. But one thing that definitely I think bridges both of these films, and the next question here I'll direct it to you, Pablo, is this notion of how well, especially in knowing, maybe this is something that you could help us frame a little bit, because I know that La Laguna del Soldado is a part of a trilogy, a reverse trilogy that you're working. So my question is not so much about that, but maybe we can keep that in the back of our minds as I ask this question. And this notion of like how these films, I mean, thinking more specifically maybe about Laguna, try to tackle the notion of the colonial project and these more surreptitious subterranean attacks, because oftentimes we know the most obvious uh, processes of the colonial project, but I think that both of these films, in some ways, bring a little bit more of the, let me put it this way, maybe the effervescence of some of these more energetic elements of the colonial project into a sort of forefront. And maybe if you could speak a little to that, or how you're addressing this within your trilogy, your backwards trilogy, and in this at the same time describing how this process as an artist and in the cinematics of it is operating.
Mhm. Well, first, Jean-Jacques, thanks so much for inviting the film and Sarah and everyone at the festival. And yeah, it's very exciting to be part of this very exciting program. So I really appreciate that. And it sounds like it's a very intriguing program with Oscar's film. And I haven't seen it, but I really want us to trade films. And because how the film begins with the mi delirio sobre el Chimborazo is in Ecuador, actually. So that's a thing that is obviously like not explicit in the film, and it actually like is later after the Colombian his Colombian like path. Then 2 years later, he ends up in Ecuador, and there's that ascent that is supposed to have happened, or maybe not. So it's like there's that kind of like intrigue of it, if it's a poem or if it's a diary, or if it's written by somebody else, and therefore it's the first monument to him. So it could be one of these three alternatives, that poem or that the writing is. But then, as this program going from the Galapagos up to the altitude of Chimborazo is phenomenal, and I see what you're asking about territory and the colonial and the colonial processes that constantly like cycle through different iterations and incarnations of struggle. So yeah, La Laguna del Solado is the second of three films, of which I have already made the third film, titled Bicentenario, which is where Bolivar ends his journey in Colombia, in his quest to liberate the country, and the beginning of the region. And now we're going a little bit back in his path from Venezuela to Bogota, and then this one, La Laguna, is up in the El Páramo. Then the first one will be in the Llanos, in the plains where he gathered the army. That's the one that I'm working on now. And yeah, like the tragedy of this story, and the story that is not particular to Colombia, but to any country that has lived that experience of territory and resource extraction and and human and non-human aggressions, is that it reemerges through time, through different ways. And what is the hardest part is like then what remains in the subconscious, in the like imprinted in land and in nature, and of course humans as nature. So it is what we then become and imagine ourselves as, in part of that, as part of that cycle. So so then, yeah, that is a deeper question that this film tries to question, and through different methods try to bring up, like, what does it mean then to live amongst the scars of a territory. And as we see in the film, there's very different kind of propositions that we bring through the different ways of seeing or listening, and the different, like, means of perception. How do we go uh, through the layers of fog in order to try to to dig and to tackle those deeper questions. um so yeah, that's quickly kind of like, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, you know, one of the things that in both works seems to me like specifically important is the world of sound, and the sound design as a way of us entering these kind of cosmological spaces. You know, like in your case, Oscar, it's like we're entering these. There's like a tunnel vision, even though it exists in the realm of sound. And with Pablo, it's like we're entering like some sort of like foggy nebulousness, but it's all in the realm of sound. Like there's like a construction of a world that is existing in the realm of sound, which is, you know, absolutely essential. I mean, in your work, Pablo, for example, I mean, the profanity of that object, which is Bolivar's. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it hasn't even been proven if it is actually a poem by Simon Bolivar, the so-called liberator of the north of South America. So like there's still the question. But okay, so now I'm bifurcating the question, because now we're talking about the role of mythology within this and poetics. I was trying to keep it more maybe within the realm of sound and the construction of sound, because you also had a performer perform the poem at the very opening of the film. So maybe let's start there. Let's start with the role
Well,
of sound and how sound came to be, and we'll start with you, Pablo, because you also collaborated with Alex Lane, who's a dear friend of mine. Who's so in any case, yeah, let's start
yeah.
there.
Well, I mean, like, going with that, the voice of that film is the Colombian filmmaker Camilo Restrepo, who made a film titled Los Conductos. In Los Conductos, there's Pinky, who's trying to get rid of his of a father figure, of the leader of a clan. And I found it very interesting to make a little bit of a cinematic connection between the desire to kill a father and then him reincarnating the ultimate patriarch of the region. And what would that mean? And maybe that as a project, it would be interesting, actually, in terms of the monument that has been created of him, and then the monument in our minds and of him. And it's no longer just bronzes in plazas and such. It's actually like the more penetrating monument is the one that is actually like the one we carry everywhere and the one we embody everywhere, and that is the one that actually is heavier than the busts or the monuments that are standing. Sound, therefore, is that kind of non material weapon to bring up the belligerent kind of nature of the situation here with Bolivar again as the tone setter for the dynamics, and how then sound and it's like, and then actually Mauricio Alvarez, who is a recordist, a sound recordist, an ethnobotanist in Colombia, he passed a few years ago, and he was recording sounds for the Humboldt Institute, who is one of the people who are studying bats. They're from the Humboldt Institute, and there they have, it's like 30,000 sound archives of birds in in the country, the sounds of the birds therefore create an archive. That archive is not only a massive library of sounds, but itself is a very interesting record of the violence that the country has gone through. So we were able to see a graph that would show us the amount of recordings, and if you put it against a graph of the conflict and the situation in Colombia, there's a correlation between the amount of sound and the amount of data recorded and what is happening in the country. So therefore, the archive itself is not only on one axis is giving us, of course, the actual like first intention, which is the sound, but then it has a collateral data that is then alluding to the general socio-political situation. So sound again is that way to enter the material through an immaterial space, the space of the waves of the pressure, the sound pressure that occupies the space between objects, and that space is full of information, to put it in an objective sense, and of course, a cinema being more than half sound, the interest then is like to inhabit that space of sound, to bring the material object of sound as a political space, and to dwell in it as an actual object and political space.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think there's a massive provocation that you're opening up here that I wish that maybe I had more time to unpack. But I also want to hear from Oscar and how the construction of sound operated within your film as well. And yeah.
Yeah, so no, it's very interesting what Pablo was saying about how sound can be a record of something else than rather only a sound as a waveform, as a content, but also what it could be. And for me, it's not a objective data, but more of a time capsule. In the film, I think the film for me unlocked itself through the sound when I found that this tunnel was this some sort of time capsule that contained a sound machine. You would say that it was the rock, and how volcanic rock sounds when it's touched by the human beings, especially because the film tries to, I don't know, it roams around what it means to touch something that is not to be touched, when it's touching what nature doesn't allow human beings to touch. And that for me was this place, this dark place where only rock sound and water dripping through the volcanic walls. And what happened when we touch with our hands, and what's that sound, what's the sound of the rock. And eventually in the film, when I figured out that touching something could create a sound, and that sound could create this kind of nightmare that happens in the film, and that nightmare is provoked somehow through sound. And the film starts with sound. And yeah, I think this sounds of the rock was some sort of a message of the island, saying something that I didn't want to really unfold in the film, because there's no real message of the island saying, there's no words. At some point I was trying, okay, what's the word of the island, what's it's saying. But it was it's not supposed to be unlocked, that message. I think it's supposed to be kept secret, and it's supposed to be more of a dream, more of a sensation. It's only allowed for the people who touches it. So that's the mystery of sound, I think, that I would try to keep real. I don't know. It's some of a secret of a nightmare also.
No, definitely those islands are haunted, and maybe we should have never even opened the
The
Pandora's
gate.
box.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I have a gazillion questions I can ask to you too, but I will open it to the audience first. And if anybody has a pending question or a pressing question, rather, please feel free to intervene. Yes. Thank you both.
I enjoyed these films, this work very much. And Pablo, I wanted to address your work. I felt like the way it was filmed was so reverent and honoring of both the geography, the history, and the biology. The people who spoke never got out of balance with the way you filmed nature and the way you held it in such reverence throughout. Even though you were speaking to violence, the drumming was the only thing that was so subtle in the way that it indicated that. And the entire film was shot with a kind of presence and awe that gave me a sense of the beauty of the land and the tragedies that had happened there. But I wanted to ask you about your method of shooting and aesthetic.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comment. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I think camera work for me is like sound recording and the process of it itself, actually, and being very kind of present is the word, I think, for everything. Today, I was speaking with a filmmaker friends in a rough cut they're making, and I was just encouraging presence more than anything, even during editing, knowing that like every single thing that we do when we're editing, if it's not like if we don't feel present, like if it doesn't feel in the moment, like as a living agent with momentum and with like you're at the verge of something, like you're in the phrase of something, like you're like not in the center lane, but you're actually like on the edge of something, and that is a rich space. I feel with image relationships, I think there's something about looking that involves listening and involves then time and involves observation, of course, but observation not of the simple surface, but observation of time, and then what you happen to capture of all these terms are like very limited itself themselves, and they do like relate to ideas of acquiring and all of these things. But I think when we press the recording button, or when we roll film through time, it's more about just like being in a place and dealing with time as in a very more in a similar way as when you record sound, that you're not not trying to summarize kind of like a larger thing. You're just like very present in the moment, and I think that goes then for editing as well, and then goes for speaking with someone, and maybe that's where you're seeing or relating to how the interviews or the conversations are in a similar tone to the images, and the images are similar to the sound actually, and all of these things together come from the same place of observation. And that's why they all come together. So I think the process is that it's lots of walking. The film comes from like walking practices. I'm actually tracing the path, and so there's a lot of walking, and it's shot on film, on 16 millimeter film. There's not much that I can roll on film, so each shot is what I have, and pretty much the film is almost 1-to-1 ratio. What we see is pretty much what was acquired, what was shot, and there could be more beautiful images, but I mean, where's the end to any of that? You know, like it is what it is, and there's a beauty of that, and the same with sound, and that's why we hear mistakes in sound. That's why we see mistakes in images, but that all alludes to presence. We like we're on the ground. We hear the footsteps. We hear breathing, and that is more the object space that I'm trying to bring into that cinema space that there we can share.
For sure. I think that being in that space of reception is in itself a creative act. But I wonder if anybody else has a question.
Thank you, Pablo and Oscar, for your amazing, rich historical and aesthetically rich films. Just the programming of this particular block is just quite an experience. I had a question about the sort of the movie, Pablo, your movie begins with a sort of a heroic Bolivarian moment in the mountains, this very almost godlike moment that I think is given, the myth of Bolivar, given to Bolivar often as this mythic, heroic status. And then the film quickly begins to sort of complicate that myth and never dehistoricizing, in fact, historicizing by complicating it. And I'm wondering with the coming other films that you have, if they will continue on the track of that particular history around Bolivar, or go a more environmental route, or will they continue in parallel? This is such a beautiful movie that I think the first time I saw the Páramo represented on film was in the movie Monos, I think, from 2019, and I was very blown away by the beginning of the film, and then it goes into another environment at a lower altitude. And so, yeah, I'm just curious how you intend to continue complicating or informing that history environmentally and around this liberation mythology of Bolivar.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comment. And the third film, which is the final film, is completed. It's titled Bicentenario. And you can actually, if you search me on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, I'll send you the movie and you can watch it. And it's the culmination of it. And I'm just making the first one now. And I can tell you that the third one, this one is in a way a conjuring of Bolivar. Like it brings the reading of his, again, the poem that we've been talking about, and so it's like somehow an embodied conjuring of him. In the third film, in Bicentenario, we do an exorcism. So the third film is an exorcism of his spirit. And it continues the conjuring through a medium, a spiritual medium, at the beginning of the film, and later it goes into trying to get for us to get rid of him. And there is something about the monumentality and of again the figure that I'm very interested in, and it is the center of the project. And through that, then we have different kind of expressions and territories, and the project is very sensitive to the psychogeographic kind of like dynamics of each relation, the topography, the ecology, the inhabitants, the altitude. The altitude affects the rhythm. It's a high Andean. Rhythms are slower, and there's no way to make a fast film in the Andes, and then the lower one will be a more animated film. It's in the first one. It's in the plains, in the llanos, and it has a very different tolerance to time. and to color. This last one, and also color is an important thing. The first one will be yellow. This one is blue. Bicentenario is red, and it has again that psycho relation to color and to nonverbal stimulus and language, and each one has its own particular engagement with the figure of Bolivar as that patriarch that remains, and what can we do, and what can we imagine, if there is any space to imagine a different future, if there is still time to imagine a different future, and if so, what can we do about that? Who can be our heroes, and who can be our monuments as we go into the future in an effort to build again. But yeah, I'll send you the Bicentenario if you write me a note.
No, for sure. I find this reverse trilogy, like starting with the third, second, like to be like extremely fascinating, especially in dealing with this notion of history, mythology, and the Latin American sort of, especially like North Latin American kind of like mythology that has been built around Bolivar. I like, because I mean, everybody should definitely go check Bicentenario, because you've already started this kind of like you say, this purging effect, and then you end up in this misty kind of like film, which is the one that we just saw today. And so the grounding component is something I'm very curious to see.
Well, yeah, and I think too is like when we're going underwater and we're looking for the bones and for the dead soldiers, what happens in the third film, in Bicentenario, there's a surprise. Like we find them alive. They're very alive, and they're actually like blasting the Palace of Justice. So like underwater, and we're searching for the ghosts of these supposedly dead soldiers, and the soldiers are not dead. They're alive. They're just like 3 generations later, but we're going through struggle. So the connections happen throughout the films, and it's not that they're linear. They're actually, like, as we know, they're backwards, but they have the connections, and they conjure, like they bring together that story of eternal conundrum that seems to be.
Okay, one more question from the audience, if anybody has a lingering. I think the question that I want to ask is a little big. It's about the role. I mean, because somebody mentioned why this program works, and I think that it has to do with like the mythos that is embedded into some of these like kind of like imagistic vocabularies that y'all are both dealing with. I mean, the letter to me is an image. It's not just a bunch of words. It's more of an image actually than it is a bunch of words. Like, and Bolivar has been turned into a gazillion images already, right? So like in taking this kaleidoscopic, this kind of schizophrenic, ultimately, letter that is profane, and it's, like I said, we don't even know if it's actually his. It's already building another image. So like the deconstruction element that is happening there is something important. And then going to Oscar's film, when we talk about the Galapagos Islands, those islands have always been mystifying, and they haven't been demystified, right? So like it's always within the realm of the mythic that they exist. They're ugly islands when you really think about it, in comparison to like this notion of like the translucent blue Caribbean oceans. The Galapagos Islands are ugly if you really put them in comparison. Like obviously they're like exalted as this kind of like monument to Darwin, and I mean it's hard for me to describe, because you start getting into nebulous territory. As soon as I say a word, it's going to be like like that, that the thing. So yeah, that's why I said that the question was complicated. But then the role of myth is really, and I'm not going to pose it as a question, I'm just going to leave it as a dangling word. did that ever sit with you in the construction of the film? That will be my question.
Oscar.
Well, I think in relationship with myth, I think that when for me when dealing with this yeah, uncharted territory that's always been around myths, as you were saying, especially with pirates, I try to approach yeah the what pirates wrote about the islands, because Melville really in his book he brings together everything that people before him wrote about the islands. So for me, it was more than demystifying the island or the myth. It was more of where I want to put the film in this chronology of the myths about the island. You know, where does my film sits in this you know, geo yeah, this long tradition of building myths of the island. And for me, it was specifically trying to demystify what, for example, I don't know, a traditional BBC nature documentary about the islands are. So it was also trying to demystify that myth, because that's also myth, right? This way of filming nature as a super drama, assigning characters to animals. That's how the nature documentaries are. So I was trying to demystify that kind of gaze of doing films in the islands, and trying to put my film more in the side of pirates, myth, and legends. So it was more of where my film sits in relationship of the tradition of building an image of the island, and I wanted to be more in the side of the pirates and try to deconstruct uh, a nature documentary and put it more in the speculative, in the I don't know, closed meaning uh, images. Yeah, I know that's the relationship with the myth, I think.
That makes perfect sense to me. Narrowing it, yes, perfect.
Yeah, I'm in a similar kind of project of appropriating the narratives ultimately as well. It's what like the all the conversations with the inhabitants of this region as they speak to the history is it is the history that is the history that I believe in, and that often goes in friction to official histories or again and what like and that is that boundary between oral history orality and the big age history and then myth and all these different energies that go into nation building, into patriotic projects, and then how to crack and rub the patina of those monuments as a project. That is where I think I can like tackle the question or the prompt of uh, how then us as participants in societies as active agents of a place with a history, how do we carry that history with us, and how then do we pass it on, and how do we uh, navigate in it, but also within our navigation we're going to create waves. So it's like we're not just passive observers of stories, we're actually like we are affecting our surroundings. And that is where I think that, like that's the ultimate project of in the first film, that aims to begin maybe speculating the with the beginnings of the army, because Bolivar went down there to a population that didn't need any liberation. They were very happy in the llanos, in the plains, doing their own thing. They're quite autonomous and pretty hardcore, and nobody dared go there. But of course, Bolivar, as a great strategist as he was, he knew that that was the only army that could actually battle the Spanish. But they had nothing to do in that war. They had nothing to do in that war. So again, how is that interaction of agents through time. And maybe at the in that first film, we might speculate through alternate beginnings. Maybe it will end as a happy film, as a what would have been like, and maybe that's what that film will hope for, and that's perhaps why Backwards made sense as well, to maybe have a happy ending, which is actually not a happy ending, but a promising beginning. But it's a beginning that never materialized. But then that's the issue. How do we materialize new beginnings?
Speculative.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
yes, we have to wrap it up.
But
Yes.
making them real, like actually acting,
Maybe it'll be a comedy. Maybe it's been comedy of errors the entire time. Thank you very much, Oscar. Pablo, muchas gracias por estar aquí.
Dima.
Thank you so much.
Wait, Pablo, please remain. Eric here wants to talk to you. In any case, but I wanted to say thank you to the both of you, to all of the artists in the festivals, Miriam Charles, our artist in focus, everybody who's been a participant in the entire festival. Please, deep thanks. Yes.
Thank you, JJ. Seriously, beautifully programmed, and always compelling conversation provoked by Jean-Jacques. Pablo, my name is Eric. I'm the director.
Eric.
I'm the director of the Documentary Center at the University of Colorado, and we host this festival. And I just wanted to let you know that we had this special programming category that your film was a part of and entered into competition for the Moving Creatures Grand Prize, sponsored by the Cool Boulder Initiative, and you won that grand prize, $2,000. And I just wanted to let you know here.
That's pretty amazing. Thank you, Eric. That's Sarah sent me a little maybe heads up, and that is absolutely amazing. I went to the description of the prize, and it's beautiful. It's such a beautiful prize, and then of course I go to the festival itself as a project, and I love what you're doing. I love that every single submission had an entry to could watch films. I love that the percentages of submissions to like what you're doing is very exciting, and I really appreciate you having taken our films, Oscar and my film, and also many other beautiful films that I saw in the program. I could not be there because I was telling you guys that I was shooting a film, so I could not go, unfortunately. But I'm very happy, and I really appreciate the jury and you all, programmers and volunteers and projectionists and everybody who works at the festival to make it happen. I know it's a big movement of many months, and I really appreciate that, and all the audiences that I'm sure went through quite a journey this last week. So
and Oscar, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
To you.
Thank you, Pablo, so much. Thank you to all of the artists who are here, who were here, who participated over Zoom, who couldn't. Pablo, I'm thankful that you were shooting a film. That means that we can see it later. And hopefully you'll join us next time.
Hopefully.
Charles, our artist in focus, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to even participants, Michael Singer, Camille Parmesan. Thank you guys so much for being here as well. Thank you to the Dairy Center for the Arts for letting us stay very late. And good night.
Good night.
Ciao. Good night.
Ciao.